Pennsylvania has always been known for its quiet towns and peaceful countryside, but that peaceful surface hides some of the darkest stories you'll ever hear. Tonight, we're diving into 5 brand new, true small-town horror stories, no repeats from any previous episode. A family cabin in Venango County where a night of laughter turned suddenly into chaos and bloodshed. A century-old killing born from superstition and fear in York County's infamous Hex Hollow. A strange geological anomaly in Potter County where ice forms in summer and where people have mysteriously vanished for over 100 years. A Clearfield County farmhouse where despair grew silently until it destroyed an entire family. And the disappearance of 21-year-old Courtney Stouffer, a woman who vanished from her own apartment in a time window so small it still baffles investigators. Before we begin, make sure you hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and like this video to help these stories reach more people. And if you're from any of these towns, let me know in the comments below. Now, let's start with a story from deep in the woods of Venango County, the night of the Lake Ronkonkoma cabin stabbings. Violence in rural places always feels different. It feels sharper, more unexpected, because these are the places we grow up believing are insulated by distance and silence. These are the places where people go to feel safe, hunting cabins deep in the woods, small family gatherings by the river, nights lit only by firelight and the occasional radio. Nothing about the wilderness suggests danger until the very moment danger arrives. And when it does, there is no one to hear, no one to intervene, no one to stop the unfolding of something that should never have happened. The events in Clay Township, tucked in the wooded folds of Venango County, were exactly that kind of rupture. A night meant for quiet family time, nothing more ambitious than food, conversation, and the soft drip of the Allegheny River beyond the trees, turned quickly into something else, something violent, chaotic, and irreversible. The kind of tragedy that spreads outward for years in small-town Pennsylvania, whispered about in fire halls, retold in bait shops, mentioned with a shake of the head whenever someone brings up how unpredictable people can be. The cabin was meant to be a place of escape. Families in rural counties keep these places as anchors, spots where generations return to hunt, fish, repair, rebuild, start over. The Arner family used theirs the same way, a quiet retreat where nothing ever happened that deserved the word extraordinary. But ordinary places can become extraordinary in an instant, and that instant came in the form of a young man, a family member who arrived carrying something inside him that none of the others recognized early enough to prevent. Violence rarely emerges suddenly. It accumulates, it gathers force, and on that night in 2022, it found its release. What happened inside the cabin is known through testimony, police records, and the words of the only survivor who was able to flee into the dark woods seeking help. The family had gathered for what should have been a simple evening. Conversations rose and fell with the rhythm of old stories. Nothing in the atmosphere suggested the turn to come. But beneath the surface, one person carried a tension that others misread as moodiness or withdrawal, common enough traits in a world where private struggles often remain private. The shift began as a flicker, a tone change, a sudden sharpness in a reply, a sense that someone in the room had disconnected from the others. And then the flicker escalated. Words turned into confrontation. Confrontation turned into shouting. And shouting turned into the single moment where someone stepped across the unseen line that separates internal turmoil from outward destruction. The knife appeared quickly. The movement from argument to attack was so fast that the others didn't have time to interpret what was happening. Later, the survivor would describe the moment as a break, a fracture in reality itself, when the night split into 2 halves, the time before the blade and the time after. The first blows were chaotic, not aimed with precision, but with release. People who had been speaking moments earlier now cried out in shock, and then in pain, and then in fear. A space filled with warmth collapsed into violence. A loved one became an attacker. And the walls of the cabin, built to hold in heat during winter hunts, trapped the unfolding horror instead. The survivor who fled did so not because of bravery, but because of instinct, the raw human drive to escape the impossible. They ran through the trees in near darkness, bleeding, disoriented, desperate to reach a neighbor's house that was far enough away to make hope seem fragile, but close enough to make survival possible. Dogs barked, lights turned on, phones rang, and then police began speeding toward a place that, minutes earlier, had been no different from any other private cabin in Venango County. Inside the cabin, those who hadn't escaped had no such luck. The attacker moved through the room with the frantic aggression of someone who had crossed into a state beyond logic. Some victims tried to shield others, some tried to reason, some tried to fight back, but none of it mattered. The scene was small, the exits limited, the shock overwhelming. When officers finally arrived and entered the cabin, what they found was the aftermath of a family's collapse, an interior space that had held decades of memories, now marked forever by a level of violence that no one would have believed possible in such a setting. The attacker was found on the property, disoriented and covered in evidence of what had taken place. There was no escape attempt, no confession, no clarity, only the hollow shell of someone who had committed an act so sudden and catastrophic that even law enforcement struggled to reconcile the person before them with the brutality inside the cabin. In the days that followed, Clay Township shifted into the uneasy quiet that comes after tragedy. Reporters arrived. Neighbors struggled to articulate what they knew. Members of the extended family tried to understand how a gathering meant for connection had turned into a nightmare. In small communities, news doesn't need amplification. It spreads without effort. And this spread with the weight of disbelief. People who had known the family for years shook their heads, insisting no warning signs had ever been visible. Others whispered that something must have been simmering beneath the surface. Anger, mental illness, resentment, something, because nothing is ever truly sudden. The survivor's testimony was essential. They described confusion, screams, chaos. They described running barefoot across cold earth, convinced they wouldn't make it. They described fear, not of the dark, but of the silence that followed, the silence that meant others were no longer able to run. Court proceedings later focused on motive, but motives in cases like this rarely satisfy. They shrink the enormity of violence into tidy words that never capture its true shape. The defense spoke of mental instability, of emotional collapse, of a mind in crisis. Prosecutors spoke of responsibility, of choice, of the irreversible damage done. In the courtroom, the attacker's face appeared calm, almost numb, the way people look when the consequences of their actions outrun their ability to feel them. Sentencing provided legal closure, but little emotional clarity. The wounds carved into the community weren't the kind that close when a verdict is read. They were the kind that linger, resurfacing every time someone passes a cabin in the woods, or hears a sudden shout, or thinks about how quickly normal life can collapse. The cabin itself remains the most unsettling symbol, not because of what it contained, but because of what it represented. A place built for family, for memory, for generations to gather. A place meant to anchor people to one another, not break them apart. There is something uniquely haunting about violence that occurs in places associated with safety. It flips the emotional geography of a community. It reminds people that danger can find them even in the spaces they trust most. People who live in Venango County still mention it in low voices, sometimes with disbelief, sometimes with sorrow, sometimes with anger. It didn't feel like a crime from their world. It felt imported from somewhere else, something that should have belonged to a television drama or a distant headline. But it wasn't distant. It was theirs. That is what makes it so disturbing. Even now, people talk about the survivor, how strong they were, how lucky, how traumatized. They talk about the victims, people who had no reason to believe that night would be different from any other family gathering. They talk about the attacker in tones that shift between confusion and condemnation. And they talk about the cabin, always the cabin, because it stands as the physical proof that the world can change inside the walls you trust most. Small-town Pennsylvania holds tightly to its tragedies. They become woven into the region's identity, passed from one generation to the next in altered forms, the details shifting, but the weight remaining the same. The Lake Ronkonkoma cabin stabbings have already become one of those stories, an event that left behind too much silence to ever fully fade. And that is how most small-town horror stories begin. Not in the shadows, not with strangers, not with legends, but with the simple idea that sometimes the people we know best carry storms inside them that we never see until it is far too late. That night in Clay Township will never be forgotten. It doesn't belong to folklore. It doesn't belong to ghost stories. It belongs to the real world, the world where tragedy doesn't ask permission before it arrives. There are places in Pennsylvania where the past feels closer than anywhere else. Places where the land seems to remember every footstep, every prayer, every whispered warning. York County is one of those places, especially the deep rural pocket long known as Hex Hollow. To outsiders, it is just another quiet valley, a stretch of farmland and woods. To locals, it is a place where superstition and belief once clashed so violently that the echo of a single crime still lingers nearly a century later. The Hex Hollow murder is not merely a case. It is a collision between old traditions, deep fear, and a kind of belief that feels older than the land itself. It began with a man named Nelson Remeyer, a farmer who lived alone in a modest house surrounded by acres of old-growth forest. Remeyer practiced powwow healing, a mixture of Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic, scripture, home remedies, and ritual passed down through generations. Powwow practitioners were common in rural Pennsylvania at the time. For most, their work was harmless, curing illness, blessing livestock, lifting what people believed were minor curses. But belief is a fragile thing, and in 1928, a young man named John Blymeyer allowed belief to consume him completely. Blymeyer had grown up steeped in superstition. His family whispered about curses, omens, hexes, and ways to undo bad luck. He had once been considered a gifted powwow practitioner himself, someone with a talent for ritual, but good fortune did not stay with him. As he reached adulthood, his luck turned sharply. His health failed, his wife left him, his job collapsed. Every part of his life seemed to sour, one misfortune after another. And in his desperation, he began to believe that someone had placed a curse on him. That belief became the compass by which he navigated the world. He sought other powwow practitioners for help. They offered rituals, prayers, counterspells, none of which worked. He believed his life force was weakening. He spoke of feeling drained by some invisible force. Over time, the suspicion grew into certainty. Someone was stealing his luck, his health, his spirit. And when he sought another reading from a local practitioner known as the River Witch of Marietta, she told him that the person responsible was an older powwow man with strong power. She described him in detail. To Blymeyer, the description pointed directly to one man, Nelson Remeyer. The idea took root instantly. It grew fast, fed by every misfortune he experienced. Soon, he was convinced that Remeyer had placed a hex on him, one so strong that only a drastic ritual could undo it. The instructions the River Witch gave him were simple but ominous. He needed to obtain a lock of Remeyer's hair and burn it. Or failing that, he needed to take Remeyer's copy of The Long-Lost Friend, a famous powwow book, and bury it. Doing either would break the curse, but Blymeyer could not obtain either. Remeyer refused his request to visit alone. He locked away his personal copy of the book, and the rejection only deepened Blymeyer's paranoia. Belief became obsession. Obsession became certainty. Certainty became rage. By the autumn of 1928, Blymeyer had convinced himself there was only one way to break the supposed hex. He would have to confront Remeyer directly, but confronting him was not enough. In Blymeyer's distressed mind, only violence could free him from the spiritual grip he imagined. He sought allies, and belief, like fear, is contagious. Two young relatives, John Curry, 14, and Wilbert Hess, 18, were drawn into his obsession. They had troubles of their own, insecurities that Blymeyer fed with stories of dark forces, curses, and the need to reclaim their fate. He spoke with the fervor of a preacher and the desperation of a drowning man. Soon, the boys believed him completely. The plan was simple in concept: sneak into Remeyer's house, retrieve the book or the hair, and burn whatever they found. But belief-driven plans rarely remain simple. On the night of November 27, 1928, the three of them walked toward Remeyer's farmhouse under cover of darkness. Leaves crackled underfoot. The woods seemed to close around them. The boys were scared, but Blymeyer was consumed, driven by the conviction that his life depended on this moment. They arrived at the house. Remeyer answered the door, surprised but not alarmed. He knew Blymeyer. He knew his troubles. And he had always tried to maintain a measure of kindness toward him. He allowed them inside. They sat. They talked. But the conversation changed. Blymeyer's questions became pressing, insistent. He demanded the book. He demanded hair. He demanded proof that the hex could be undone. Remeyer refused, and that refusal broke something inside Blymeyer. The argument escalated. The boys joined in, fueled by fear and desperation. And soon the confrontation spiraled into violence. They attacked Remeyer first with their fists, then with anything they could grab. The struggle was brutal. Remeyer was strong, but he was outnumbered. And Blymeyer, caught in the grip of fanatic belief, fought with a frenzy that defied reason. When it was over, Remeyer lay dead. But the most disturbing part had not yet begun. Believing the curse would persist unless they destroyed his power, they attempted to burn the body. They believed fire would break the hex once and for all. They set the house alight, or so they thought, but the wood was too damp, the fire too weak. It scorched only part of the floorboards before dying out. To them, the failure was a sign. The curse was stronger than they feared. The boys panicked. They fled into the night. They carried with them not triumph, but terror. The next morning, a neighbor discovered the scene. The body. The signs of struggle. The scorched floor. The scorched floor. And within hours, the rumor spread. Something terrible had happened in Hex Hollow. Locals recognized the name immediately. They remembered the stories. Remeyer had been a powwow man. People whispered about curses, stolen luck, and the danger of crossing him. And as the details emerged, the story took on a supernatural shape long before the truth was fully known. Police arrests came quickly. Blymeyer was taken into custody and confessed with the strange calm of a man who believed he had done something necessary. The boys confessed too, shaken by what they had seen and what they had helped carry out. Court proceedings followed, and the nation watched. Reporters seized on the story. They painted Hex Hollow as a place of dark magic, superstition, and old-world witchcraft. The phrase, witch murder, dominated headlines. It made rural Pennsylvania sound like a medieval village haunted by superstition. But beneath the sensationalism was something far sadder, a man with untreated psychological distress, consumed by belief, who dragged two teenagers into an act of fatal violence. The trial laid bare the dangers of unchecked superstition. Blymeyer spoke about feeling cursed, drained, hunted by forces he couldn't control. His conviction was certain. He was sentenced to life in prison. The boys received lesser sentences, though their futures were forever marked by that night. Remeyer's house remained standing. Locals avoided it for decades, calling it cursed ground. Children whispered that the spirit of Remeyer watched from the windows. Adults warned each other never to approach it after dark. The house eventually earned the name Hex House, and even today it attracts curiosity seekers who want to stand where belief and violence collided so tragically. The real tragedy of Hex Hollow is not the magic, not the superstition, not the ritual. It is the way belief can warp when someone is desperate enough to surrender to it completely. Blymeyer wasn't evil. He wasn't malicious. He was terrified. And fear, when fed with the wrong ideas, can become a weapon more dangerous than any physical force. Remeyer, for his part, was not a witch, not a curse maker, not a villain. He was a healer in a rural tradition that combined faith and folklore. And he died because someone mistook misunderstanding for malevolence. Nearly a century later, the Hex Hollow murder still fascinates people. It feels like a story from another era, but its core is modern. Belief can be powerful, too powerful. And when belief overrides reality, the consequences can be catastrophic. York County remembers the story not as a sensational crime, but as a warning. One of the oldest warnings humanity knows: fear becomes dangerous when it is given a target. Bleymeyer's fear found that target in Remeyer. And the result was one of the most haunting crimes in Pennsylvania history. Today, people visit Hex Hollow to feel the weight of that history. They walk the trails, they look at the house, they feel the unease that settles over the land. But the true haunting is not the place, it is the story. A reminder that the line between belief and obsession is thin, and when it breaks, the world around it breaks too. The Hex Hollow murder remains one of the strangest, saddest, and most powerful cautionary tales ever to emerge from Pennsylvania's rural valleys. There are places in Pennsylvania where the land behaves in ways that feel almost sentient. Places where nature bends its own rules, where the wind carries strange whispers, where the ground seems older than memory itself. Deep in Potter County, tucked among rolling hills and endless forest, stands one such place, a geological anomaly known as the Coudersport ice mine, a place where ice forms in the heat of summer and melts away in the dead of winter, a place science struggles to fully explain. DEG. A place locals speak of with curiosity, caution, and sometimes fear. For most, the Coudersport ice mine is a roadside oddity, a strange stop on a road trip, a quirk of nature. But for those who have lived near it their entire lives, the ice mine is something else entirely. It is a place woven with stories about disappearances, about voices in the tunnels, about cold air that feels more like breath than wind, about travelers who wandered too far into the woods and were never seen again. This is not a single story, it is a collection of them. A series of small tragedies and unsettling events that have orbited the ice mine for more than a century. And together, they form a disturbing mosaic of mystery. The ice mine itself was discovered in 1894 when workers noticed cold air streaming upward from a crack in the hillside in midsummer. Curious, they dug deeper, revealing an underground chamber that defied expectation. Inside that chamber, ice formed naturally on the walls and floor during the hottest months of the year, sometimes reaching several feet thick. In winter, when logic suggested the chamber should have been frozen solid, the ice melted. The cycle inverted itself. Cold when it should be warm, warm when it should be cold. Geologists offered theories: airflow patterns, chimney rock formations, pressure differentials, but no theory explained everything. The ice mine remained what it had always been, an unexplained pocket of cold hidden in the forest, and people, as they always do, filled the gaps in understanding with stories. The earliest disappearances were small enough that nobody connected them. A hunter who failed to come home. A prospector who walked into the woods and didn't return. In the early 1900s, disappearing in the wilderness was not uncommon. Life was rough, people wandered, people got lost. But a pattern began to form, a subtle one, when families realized that several of the missing had been last seen near the ice mine. The old-timers began to whisper that the place had a pull to it. Not a physical pull, but something more atmospheric, a feeling that drew the lost and the lonely toward it. They said the cold air carried voices. They said if you listened long enough, you could hear your own name. Locals claimed the first true incident happened in 1914 when a young woman named Clara Sykes vanished during an afternoon walk. She had been staying with relatives in Coudersport for the summer, enjoying the forests and the quiet air. One morning she left alone to sketch wildflowers near the ice mine. She never returned. Search parties combed the area for days. They found her sketchbook on a rock near the mine's entrance, pages fluttering in the wind. Her pencil lay beside it. The sketch she'd been working on showed wildflowers bending forward, as if pushed by a breeze coming from underground. The last mark her pencil made was a jagged, downward line, almost a slash. Then nothing. There were no footprints leading away, no sign she had fallen, no torn clothing, no blood, no body, just silence. Authorities blamed disorientation, or a fall into a hidden shaft, or an animal attack. But Clara's family insisted none of that made sense. She was careful, experienced with the outdoors, and the area around the ice mine, though rugged, was not known to hide sudden drop-offs. Her disappearance became the first widely remembered mystery tied to the ice mine, but it would not be the last. As decades passed, more stories accumulated. A hiker whose dog returned without him, a fisherman whose gear was found neatly stacked near the entrance of the mine, a drifter who was seen asking questions about the cold air, only to vanish the next morning. Local lore grew heavy. Those who worked near the ice mine told visitors not to wander off marked paths. Children dared each other to run close to the opening, then sprint away before the cold could reach them. Some claimed they saw faint shapes through the cracks in the rock shadows that didn't match their own. Then came the story of the voices. Sometime in the 1950s, a pair of teenagers reported hearing whispering coming from the mine. They claimed they couldn't make out words, only the timbre, soft, urgent, like someone speaking through cupped hands. They thought it was a prank. They thought someone was hiding inside to scare them. But when adults returned to investigate, they found nothing. The opening was too narrow for someone to hide in. The chamber was too deep, and the cold air still pushed upward steadily, as if the earth itself were breathing. Over time, locals accepted the ice mine's strangeness as part of the landscape. People visited it, people studied it, people took photos in front of it. But the disappearances kept happening. Every few years, another hiker or traveler failed to come home. Some were found miles away, some were never found at all. Then, in the 1970s, something happened that pushed the ice mine into the realm of unsettled memory. A man from New York came to study the mine's airflow. He was a geology enthusiast, fascinated by unexplained formations. He spent days examining the area, placing small flags and markers around the hillside. He took photos, measurements, notes. One evening, he told a local shopkeeper that he felt as though the ice chamber was responding to him. The clerk laughed it off. Tourists always said strange things about the place, but the man was serious. He claimed that each time he leaned near the opening, the cold air pulsed, as if reacting. His notebook was found the next week on the ground near the mine. Inside, the last page held a chilling line: "There is something behind the cold." The man himself was never located. Search teams found no trail, no tracks, no sign he had walked away. Some believed he had slipped into a hidden cavity in the earth. Others believed he simply wandered off and succumbed to the elements. But his note left people uneasy. The ice mine closed temporarily. The owners repainted signs, they reinforced barriers, but the stories continued. In the decades that followed, the mine became a curiosity again, a place for tourists, school trips, and local lore. The older generations didn't talk about the disappearances anymore. They didn't want to scare newcomers or children. But the atmosphere around the mine never fully lost its weight. People said phones died near it. Compasses spun erratically. Birds avoided the trees closest to the opening. And then came the story that still haunts Potter County today. In the early 2000s, a local father and son were hiking near the mine. The boy, 8 years old, wandered ahead as children often do. He followed a narrow path that led close to the mine's entrance. His father called after him. The boy laughed, echoing through the trees, and turned to run back. Then he stopped, completely, mid-step. His father watched him freeze rigid, staring at the mine's dark opening. The father ran to him, shouting his name. When he reached him, the boy didn't blink, didn't respond. His body was stiff, cold to the touch. He whispered something so softly the father had to lean down to hear. It's calling. The father grabbed him and fled down the trail, refusing to look back. When they reached their truck, the boy began crying without understanding why. He had no memory of what he had said, no memory of stopping, no memory of staring into the opening. He only remembered the cold. That story spread through Potter County faster than wildfire. Parents stopped letting their children near the ice mine without supervision. Some locals began refusing to walk by it at all. Tourists kept coming, unaware of the history, but locals kept their distance. They said the place felt wrong. They said the cold wasn't natural. They said the mine didn't freeze in summer by accident. The ice mine is still there. Visitors can still stand in front of the railing and feel the cold air pouring upward, stronger on hot days, softer on cold ones. They can look into the dark gap beneath the rocks and see nothing but blackness. They can take photos of themselves, smiling, enjoying the novelty. But if you ask the families who lost loved ones there, they won't smile. They'll tell you the forest around the ice mine is beautiful, but strange. They'll tell you the ground shifts subtly, like someone walking beneath it. They'll tell you that sometimes, when the wind is quiet, they hear faint whispers, not words, but direction, coming from the mine's opening. And they'll tell you that the disappearances never truly stopped. What makes the Coudersport ice mine unsettling is not a single event, but a pattern. A pattern of people drawn to a place where the laws of nature twist ever so slightly. A place where ice defies the seasons, a place where the cold feels deliberate, a place where silence feels watchful. Whether the mine is a geological oddity, a natural trap, a dangerous maze, or something more elusive, nobody can say with certainty. But the people of Potter County know one thing: something in those woods pays attention, and for more than a century, it has been waiting. Small towns are supposed to be the places where nothing bad happens. That is their promise. That is their comfort. People move to them because life feels simpler there, slower, quieter, safer. But when tragedy takes place behind the walls of a home in a small town, it cuts deeper. It hits harder. It lingers longer. Yes. Because in a place where everyone knows everyone, a single violent act doesn't just end lives, it fractures an entire community. The Arbogast family murders in Clearfield County are exactly that kind of story. A story without monsters from the outside. A story without intruders, stalkers, or strangers who slipped in unnoticed. Instead, it is a story where the danger came from someone familiar, a grandfather, a father figure, a man whose life had collapsed in ways no one fully saw or didn't want to see until it was too late. And because of that, what happened inside that rural farmhouse still weighs on the people who remember it. Clearfield County in the late 1980s was the kind of place where days were predictable. Families worked, children played, neighbors waved from porches. Problems existed. Every community has them, but they were the quiet kind, the kind people handled privately, the kind that never spilled into public view. The Arbogast family seemed no different from the outside. Their farmhouse sat on a quiet patch of land, surrounded by hills and fields where the seasons showed themselves honestly, spring with its soft green, autumn with its fire-colored foliage, winter with its brutal cold. The house had seen generations of life. Holidays, birthdays, family dinners, ordinary days that passed without note. But beneath that familiar exterior, something had been shifting. Something had been deteriorating inside the mind of the family patriarch, Albert L. Arbogast. He was a man who had grown up in the era when men didn't talk about their emotions, didn't express fear, didn't reveal weakness. Hardship was endured, not discussed. Pain was swallowed, not shared. And the result of a lifetime of that silence was a man who seemed to the outside world stern but functional, while inside his stability was eroding grain by grain. Financial pressure played a part, age played a part, illness played a part, but the largest part was the crushing sense that he was losing control of his home, of his family, of his identity, of his place in the world. The people closest to him tried to help. They tried to soothe him, reassure him, comfort him. But reassurance means nothing to a man who has convinced himself that he is failing the people he loves. And Albert believed exactly that. Looking back, the signs seem clearer. He grew more withdrawn, less patient, more rigid. Conversations became tense. His mood shifted quickly. He stopped sleeping well. He worried constantly. But in the late 1980s, mental health was not something rural families talked about openly. What one person called depression, another called stress. What one called instability, another called a rough patch. People hoped things would get better. They assumed they would. They didn't. The night of the murders felt like any other winter night. Cold, quiet. The kind of night where sound travels too far and darkness seems too heavy. Inside the farmhouse, the Arbogast family settled into their evening routine, small moments, the kind you don't remember until it's too late. The children getting ready for bed, their mother tidying the kitchen, their grandfather retreating to the room where he often sat alone, steeped in his private thoughts. Those thoughts had been growing darker for months. No one knows exactly when Albert made his decision. Whether it was a sudden break or a long internal descent finally reaching its end. Some believe he snapped in a single instant of overwhelming despair. Others believe he planned it quietly, rehearsing the logic over and over until the unthinkable began to feel, in his distorted mind, like a twisted act of mercy. What is clear is that the moment he picked up the shotgun, the course of the night changed in a way no one could undo. He moved through the house with a cold determination that later left law enforcement stunned. He killed his daughter first, his own child, ending her life before she even had time to react. Then he turned toward his grandchildren, small children with no understanding of what was happening, no defense against the violence that followed. Their deaths were quick, but the cruelty of the act remains unbearable to anyone who hears the details. Some crimes contain malice, others contain madness. This one contained despair. A despair so deep it drowned not just one life, but several. Albert then turned the weapon on himself. When police arrived, called by a concerned relative who sensed something terribly wrong, they found a silent house. No movement, no sound, just the stillness that comes after a violent act has burned itself out. The officers who entered would later say the scene stayed with them forever, not because of gore, though there was plenty, but because of the overwhelming sense of tragedy. A family destroyed not by hatred, but by the implosion of a single human mind. The news spread through Clearfield County like a shockwave. People couldn't comprehend it. They didn't want to. Neighbors cried openly. Schools offered counselors. Churches held vigils. Everyone knew the family. Everyone had seen the children. Everyone had spoken to their mother. Everyone had waved to Albert. That is the nature of small towns. Lives overlap constantly, and so the grief was communal. Funerals in small towns are never large in number, but the Arbogast funeral felt larger than any the community had seen. People filled the pews. People stood outside. People came not because they knew what to say, but because they didn't. Silence is sometimes the only response to tragedy. The house stood empty afterward. Family members cleaned it, packed belongings, tried to remove the physical traces of what happened, but the emotional traces remained. Neighbors said they felt uneasy passing it at night. Some swore they heard sounds, creaks, knocks, whispers carried by the wind. Most dismissed those feelings as nerves. Trauma leaves echoes, even in wood and stone. Eventually, the house was sold. A new family moved in. Life returned to the property in the most practical sense. Children played in the yard again. Holidays were celebrated. But among older locals, the house's history never faded. The story of the murders became a kind of cautionary tale, not about violence, but about the silent battles people fight, the ones others never see. For years afterward, whenever someone in the area began struggling with depression or stress, neighbors referenced the Arbogast tragedy as a reminder of the importance of checking in, of speaking up, of not letting sorrow fester in isolation. Law enforcement officers who worked the case said it changed how they viewed domestic situations. It taught them that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes It looks like fatigue or quietness or emotional distance. Sometimes the person you least expect is the one carrying the heaviest burden. What makes the Arbogast murders so haunting is not just the violence, it's the intimacy of it. The betrayal inherent in a parent harming a child, a grandfather harming his own grandchildren. It violates an instinct that runs deeper than law, the instinct to protect, to shelter, to preserve. When that instinct collapses, the aftermath is not just horror, it is confusion. People search for reasons, explanations, warnings, but none of those searches produce satisfying answers. There is a cruelty in tragedies that come from within. Outsider violence can be blamed on strangers, on criminals, on predators. But when the threat is internal, when the monster is someone known and trusted, the entire structure of safety collapses. Clearfield County rebuilt itself, as all places must. Life continued, new families arrived, old ones moved on. But the story of the Arbogast family remains one of the darkest chapters in the area's history. Not because it was sensational, but because it was intimate, because it happened quietly, because it happened inside a home filled with toys and family photos and all the small artifacts of normal life. People still ask why. They ask what broke inside Albert's mind. They ask if the tragedy could have been prevented. They ask if anyone saw the signs. Some say they did. Some say they didn't. Memory reshapes itself in the aftermath of trauma. People remember things differently when they know how the story ends. The only clarity that remains is this. The Arbogast murders were the product of despair, left unchecked, fear left unspoken, and emotional collapse left untreated. Small-town life can be beautiful. It can also hide suffering exceptionally well. The farmhouse still stands. The wind still moves through the surrounding fields. Seasons still change with the same quiet reliability they always had, but the memory of what happened inside that house is carried by the people who lived through it. They remember the day the news broke, the way the valley seemed to fall silent, the way neighbors held each other outside the church, the way children asked questions adults didn't know how to answer. Time dulls pain, but it does not erase it. And this story, this tragedy, has become a reminder passed down among locals. Pay attention to the people you love. Ask questions. Listen. Don't assume silence means strength, because sometimes the most dangerous storms are the ones that never make a sound until the moment they break. Disappearance is one of the most terrifying forms of horror because it offers no answers. It leaves no scene to understand, no enemy to face, no narrative to complete. It leaves only absence and the long, slow unraveling of a family's certainty. When a person vanishes without explanation, the world around them shifts, rooms feel wrong, time feels distorted, conversations circle endlessly around the same few questions that no one can answer. The disappearance of 21-year-old Courtney Stouffer from Palmyra, Pennsylvania, is one of those stories, one of the most unsettling modern cases the state has seen. A young woman vanished from inside her own apartment, from a place she knew well, surrounded by people who said they cared about her. And yet, more than a decade later, her case remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in Pennsylvania. Courtney was the kind of person who lit up a room. Loud, confident, vibrant, she laughed easily, argued freely, cared deeply. People describe her as having a presence, someone who never quite blended into the background. She was 21 when she disappeared, young enough to believe she had time to sort out her life, old enough to feel the pressure of adulthood pressing in at the edges. The night she vanished, July 28, 2012, began like any other summer night for a young woman her age. Warm air, loud music, friends drifting in and out of places, bars filled with people who knew each other by face if not by name. But beneath the ordinary surface, there were small fractures in her world, frustrations, tensions, conflicts brewing quietly. Courtney lived in a modest apartment in Palmyra, a small town in Lebanon County. Her neighbors knew her. Her friends visited often. She had a boyfriend. She had routines. but she also had a temper, and she lived in a building where tempers tended to collide. Earlier in the evening, she and her boyfriend got into an argument at a local bar. It wasn't their first. People who saw them that night said the argument was heated enough to draw attention. Eventually, the police were called, not directly for the fight between them, but because her boyfriend ended up on the ground outside the bar after another confrontation involving someone else. The details were messy, but police allowed him to go home with his father. Courtney was left behind with her anger still simmering. She didn't go home immediately. Instead, she went out with friends, trying to salvage what was left of the night, drinking, dancing, letting the adrenaline of the bar argument drain from her system. Friends later said she seemed restless, like she was carrying something heavy inside her but pretending she wasn't. But nothing she said that night hinted at what was to come. By the early morning hours, she finally returned to her apartment. She wasn't alone. A friend accompanied her, someone who offered to stay over so she wouldn't be alone and upset. When they arrived, Courtney was still agitated. An earlier dispute with her downstairs neighbors reignited almost immediately. Loud stomping, yelling, slamming doors. At one point, according to 911 records, her neighbors called the police complaining about the noise. When officers arrived the first time, they spoke to both sides. They encouraged everyone to calm down, to go inside, to leave things alone for the night. The officers left. But the calm didn't last. Courtney, still fuming, began yelling again, at the walls, at the ceiling, at the situation. She was loud enough that another set of 911 calls came in. By the time police returned the second time, the apartment had fallen silent. Lights off, doors closed, no response. They left again. What happened between those two visits remains the central mystery of this case. Because the next morning, Courtney was gone. Her car was still in the parking lot. Her purse was inside. Her shoes were inside. Her phone was inside. Her dog, who she adored, was still in the apartment, pacing anxiously. Nothing was missing except Courtney. No signs of forced entry. No signs of a struggle. No obvious evidence that she had left willingly or unwillingly. Everything looked eerily ordinary. Her friend, the one who stayed with her that night, claimed he fell asleep on the couch and didn't hear her leave. He said he woke up to the sound of the dog pacing and realized Courtney wasn't home. His story has been scrutinized from every angle. Some believe him, others don't. But no evidence ever conclusively pointed to him or to anyone else. Her family knew immediately something was wrong. Courtney wasn't the type to vanish. She wasn't the type to leave her dog. She wasn't the type to disappear without a word. Within hours, her face was on the news. Flyers went up. Searches began. Helicopters scanned fields. Police combed properties. Volunteers lined up in rows and grid-searched miles of rural land. No trace, not a shoe, not a scrap of clothing. Not a single item that could confirm where she went or what happened inside that apartment after the police left. Her father became the public face of the search, pleading for information, organizing volunteers, calling investigators relentlessly. He said from the beginning that he believed someone she knew was involved. In small towns, crimes often come from familiarity, not randomness. Rumors spread quickly. People whispered about the downstairs neighbors, about the friend who stayed over, about the boyfriend, about people who had been in the apartment days earlier, about people she had fought with, about people she owed money to, about strangers passing through town, but whispering is not evidence. With each passing week, the mystery deepened. Some leads took investigators into nearby woods. Others pointed toward the Swatara Creek. Some claimed she was seen in nearby towns, false sightings that broke her family's heart each time they proved untrue. A few whispered theories suggested she had overdosed and that someone panicked and hid her body. Others insisted she was the victim of targeted violence. None of these theories ever carried enough weight to become answers. In the years that followed, more unsettling details surfaced. The friend who stayed over changed details in his story multiple times. Not enough to prove guilt, but enough to create cracks of uncertainty. DNA testing was done on objects in the apartment, phone records were analyzed, Every person in the building was interviewed multiple times. Still nothing. Detectives, both local and state, remained baffled. Courtney's disappearance had none of the normal markers of abduction. No scream, no signs of forced entry, no tire marks, no unknown DNA, no cleanup, no forensic trail at all. If she was taken, it was done with a level of precision almost unheard of in crimes of opportunity. If she left willingly, she took nothing with her, nothing to survive on, nothing she would need. That scenario made even less sense. Years passed. The case grew cold. Her family continued to push for answers. They kept her case in the public eye, insisting that someone knew something. They raised reward money. They begged for honesty. They attended every memorial for other missing persons, hoping that keeping Courtney's name alive would generate a lead. On the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, the police gave a brief statement. They said they believed foul play was involved. They said they believed she was no longer alive. They said they had suspects, plural, but not enough evidence to charge them. They said they believed the truth lay with someone close to the situation. Now, for her family, that confirmation was both a comfort and a wound. It meant Courtney had not simply walked away. It meant someone was responsible. It meant the answers existed, hidden behind fear or guilt or silence. What makes the disappearance of Courtney Stouffer so haunting is the tightness of the timeline. Police visited her apartment twice. She spoke to them. They left. And sometime in the narrow window between their departure and sunrise, she vanished without leaving a single footprint behind. It is rare, incredibly rare, for a person to disappear completely from inside their own home. Doors make noise. Floors creak, dogs bark, neighbors hear things. Something should have been visible, something should have been heard, but nothing was. That is the horror at the heart of this case, the utter, unrelenting absence. An absence that feels intentional, crafted, as if someone knew exactly how to remove someone from their life without leaving evidence behind. Today, Palmyra still remembers her. The restaurant where she once worked still occasionally gets calls asking if the case was ever solved. Her family still holds out hope. Hope for recovery, hope for justice, hope for even the smallest fragment of truth. Time has not erased her. It has sharpened the tragedy. People still talk about her in past tense because they don't know how else to talk about someone who was ripped out of the world without explanation. The apartment building where she vanished has new tenants now. People live ordinary lives there, laughing, cooking, moving in and out as if the walls do not remember. But buildings hold memory in ways humans cannot. And somewhere inside those walls is the echo of that night. The footsteps, the yelling, the silence, the unknown. Courtney's disappearance is a small-town horror story not because it contains monsters, but because it contains questions that no one has been able to answer. What happened after the police left? Did someone enter the apartment? Did someone lure her outside? Did she open the door willingly? Did she try to run? Did anyone hear her? Did anyone see her? Did anyone speak up? Or did silence bury the truth before anyone could recognize it? Until the day someone comes forward or evidence finally surfaces, the disappearance of Courtney Stouffer will remain what it has always been, a wound without closure, a story without an ending, a reminder that even in the smallest towns, people can vanish into nothing.